First of all, let me start off by saying that growing giants, especially pumpkins, what we're talking today, um, I'm not so sure how much science we can justify or we can prove that goes into it because the guys that do it seriously do a lot of stuff. And when you're only growing 4 to 10 or 12 plants a year, it's pretty difficult to narrow down exactly what's giving you your biggest pumpkins. But I've dabbled in pumpkins. I grow mainly big watermelons, but I've dabbled in the pumpkins. I've been around to all the big producers in Kentucky, and anyway, it's fun. It's pretty amazing to be able to grow a big giant pumpkin. So I'll tell you what I know, and then just ask questions. I got started in 2015 with watermelons. Um, Mr. Frank Mudd, which I'll show you at the very end. He's probably the biggest watermelon grower in the world, and he got me started. And my first year, these are two watermelons I grew, and then I was hooked after that. But let me put it in perspective as far as the world of growing giant watermelons and pumpkins. Those are the king. There's other giant fruit that people like to grow, but watermelons and pumpkins especially are the king. I like to also play around with training Labrador retrievers and like any kind of show dog or whatever, the pedigree. The pedigree is what you look at. Genetics is where it's all at. So here's one of the best field trial retrieving labs there is that everybody tries to get puppies from. Same way I used to raise Angus cattle. And this was one of the last bulls we raised, or we used as a sire. And so there again, you got the pedigree. You can go way on out. Well, uh, this is the world record pumpkin that was grown last year, 2,749 pounds, grown by Travis Geiger in Minnesota. And right there is that pumpkin's pedigree. There is a website that you can go to, and any pumpkin or watermelon that has been weighed in at a sanctioned weigh-in will have a pedigree. We got the mother on the left-hand side, father on the right-hand side, all the way down through it. So these people are serious. But for me, it's trying to wrap my head around this and understand how it's done, and also understand how it fits into my job as an extension agent, as an educator. I didn't really think about it until right when I started. There was a man that came into the office, and he grew giant bushel bulls, and he was insisting that I get some UK people down here and do some research on his bushel bulls and learn how he does the process. And in a professional way of arguing with him, that wasn't a betterment for agriculture. I didn't see. So anyway, that got me thinking. Well, what am I doing here? So I approach this as if we have a big event here, an agritourism event, and I approach it as something I'm doing for agritourism, and also if I can stimulate the interest of someone to grow fruits and vegetables, then so be it. If they start out with a giant pumpkin or watermelon, then I'm doing my job. So then I got to try to get other people to understand that this is not something that's just simple and easy to do. So there's a lot of understanding that really messes with my head sometimes when I spend a lot of time on this. But I have narrowed it down to this right here. If you talk with one of these big time growers, they'll have a list of things they'll say you have to do. And you might have to do that to grow the very, very biggest pumpkin you possibly can. But these three things, right? These three factors: genetics, weather and climate, and common sense. If you can get these three factors to work in your favor, then you can grow a giant. Uh, I do realize that, and I do know that. That's the only thing I can prove for sure. And I do know it takes planning. Um, I mean, it's if that we are a little bit in control on the size of the fruit when it comes to the planting part, because if it takes this vegetable or fruit 100 days on the vine to grow, then we've got to give it the best possible 100 days of the growing season we can. So typically, the best thing to do is say, what's your target harvest date, and plan backwards from there. And for this year, my harvest date's September 20th because we have a way off here on September 21st. So typically, when you plant a pumpkin seed, if you're in the right conditions, 20 to 30 days from planting the seed, the pumpkin plant will start to vine. 30 days later, the vining pumpkin will start to bloom and try to set fruit. So the longer you can keep the fruit on the vine, then the bigger it possibly can get. And ideally, we want that fruit to grow for at least 90 days, at least. So when you do all this math, the 30 days to vine, 30 days to bloom, 90 days to grow, you have 150 days. So 150 days before the September 20th harvest date is April 18th. So that means the seed needs to be planted by April 18th. Well, you know, the growing season, what we want and need might not actually fit our growing season. And I've been generous here saying our growing season in Kentucky at best is 140 days. And we all know that that's pushing it 140 days. But we can do this. We've proven it and we can do it. So we have to start the seeds on the inside. So for the pumpkin seeds and watermelon as well, we try to germinate them in warm soil. Above 85 degrees is best, and that's done heating mats, greenhouse. Some people even use chicken egg incubators. And then they've also found out that if we were to sand or file the outer seed coat around the outer edge, it'll help that seed coat release from cotyledons after it germinates, and it'll also soak in water and germinate a little faster. I mean, here's typically what most people do for pumpkins. They file the seed, soak them for 1 to 4 hours in warm water. Some of them even use a peroxide, or some of them use a hot water. They're thinking they're going to kill some seed-borne diseases. I haven't been able to prove that yet. Place them in a Ziploc bag with a wet paper towel. Typically 2 to 3 days, they'll germinate, and then put them in your soil. The pumpkins are fairly easy to germinate. But then here comes the problem. Okay, you can put them in the pot on April 18th, but when can you put them outside? I did a little historical research here in Brandenburg. I've got these 4 dates, April 15th through May 31st, and then it's the year across the top, and I have soil temperature and air temperature, and that soil temperature is at 4 inches below the soil. So if you look at this chart and look at the average, your average soil temperature is almost 64 degrees on May the 10th, and on May the 31st, 72 degrees. Your air temperature is still 66 degrees on May the 31st. And if we look at the top, ideal growing conditions are really above 70 degrees on the soil, and the air temperature above 75 degrees. So if you plant the pumpkin outside 2 to 3 weeks after you plant the seed, which is typically what happens, then you're not going to have ideal growing conditions. So, you know, what do we do? What do people do? Some of them put heating tables in the soil, just maybe a 4x4 area, 4x6 area, just enough to get that soil heated up around the immediate root zone, and then hopefully the soil will warm up in the next few days as the growing season progresses. This is what I do on watermelons. You can do the same thing on pumpkins, but typically we don't use landscape fabric or plastic under pumpkins. So this plastic would have to be removed as the plant started to vine. But I can plant just right here. I can warm the soil temperature up 5 or 6 degrees warmer than the soil temperature outside this plastic. Most people make some kind of little hothouse, greenhouse, and put over their plants the first 3 or 4 weeks of the growing season, and it doesn't take much. Just have to make sure you give the plant plenty of room to grow. This is a couple growers in Kentucky. What they do, they got their little hothouses out here, high tunnels, uh, and they've done quite well. This upper bigger picture here is Scott Bayou from down in Adair County. He currently holds a Kentucky state record at a pumpkin weighing 1,883 pounds. Um, soil is one thing I can't wrap my head around with what these guys do. I mean, a lot of them will use Extension Service for soil sampling, but there are a few places that specialize in giant pumpkins. But it's the most obvious thing about 6.5 is the ideal pH of the soil, and then most of them kind of sort of follow a UK recommendation on a typical pumpkin patch, but that's not enough. Most of them, almost all of them, will use some type of soil inoculant, and almost all of them are using multiple kinds of organic fertilizers, and they're putting them on at different times. The favorite thing to do, and I can't say it doesn't work, but the favorite thing to do is make some kind of tea and drench them with these organic fertilizers. Uh, yeah, I mean, you can't argue when a guy grows a 2,000-pound pumpkin. Um, the some details on the pumpkin vine that we have to take care of or look at is where the red circles are here. If you notice at each one of these leaf nodes, there's roots coming out, and these roots are beneficial to the plant. They do root and they do take up some nutrients. So everybody that grows pumpkins typically will either cover these vines. If you look back here in the back, this one's covered, or they will make sure that this plant is making good soil contact at that root zone. A lot of times the way they do that is with a wooden skewer or a bamboo pole or something. And they also use these skewers to spread the vines out and train them to grow in the direction which they want them to grow. If you don't train them, then it'll be a big mix, a huge mix. Now this picture here shows a drip irrigation. Most people do not have drip irrigation under pumpkins. They like to inject their teas and stuff in an overhead watering system. This is a typical layout. Most of the biggest pumpkins are grown in areas no smaller than 900 square feet. There is a challenge. Some of these guys that they want to grow big pumpkins and they don't have much space. They started a challenge a few years ago of growing the biggest pumpkin in 150 square feet. And actually, a guy's grown one over 1,300 pounds in 150 square feet. And so that's pretty amazing. But typically, they're 900 square feet of area or more. And this is a typical layout. You have your stump, you have your main vine, and you have secondary vines coming off the main vine. Something that I am confident in that most of the biggest pumpkins are raised at least 10 feet from the stump on the main vine. So that does look like some pretty confident science there that if you grow one any closer than 10 feet to the stump, you're probably not going to grow as big a pumpkin as you possibly can. And then Most growers, not all of them, but most of them terminate these vines when they get to the boundary of their area. Some of them terminate and then bury the end of the vines as well. And then most of them, after they'll typically set 2 or 3 fruit on the vine, and then after one has shown dominance, is growing bigger, faster than the others, they'll terminate the other fruit, and from then on, they walk the vines every day and take any female blooms off that they see. Speaking of blooms, okay, so 60 days in or so, the plant's going to set fruit. And I'm assuming people know the difference between blooms, but I got a picture here. The female bloom has the ovary on it, has the immature fruit on it. The male bloom does not. Male blooms are fine. I had someone come in one day and said they're tired of removing blooms. You know, they pull off 20 or 30 blooms a day. And then it hit me. They were pulling off male blooms. Male blooms are fine. Female blooms are not after you select the fruit that you have. Typically, this one in the top right-hand corner here, it is tomorrow morning. It's going to be ready to pollinate if you're hand pollinating. So you've got to be watching for them when they get like this. This one down here is not a giant pumpkin, but if the bloom's already open and you're going to hand pollinate and you want to do a specific cross, you're already too late on the bloom down here in the lower left because it's opened up and has been exposed to bees already. Almost everyone will hand pollinate their pumpkins because they want to make sure they get good pollination. Here's the female bloom. These lobes in here on the stigma, there's 5 on this one. Most of the growers will say the more lobes you have, the better chance, the heavier the pumpkin will be. And so they will not select anything less than 5 lobes. Then they take a male bloom, carefully pull the blossoms, the petals off of it, and then go in and self-pollinate. Make sure they get good pollen coverage in the female bloom. If you look up here at the top right, this yellow circle, once they pollinate that flower, and typically they say 9 a.m. is time to go out and pollinate. That's when the bloom's just starting to open up. Once they pollinate it, and they don't want it to be contaminated with some other pollen, they'll tie a bread tie or a piece of string around it to keep any other pollinators from entering that bloom. And then this is how fast they grow. Okay, the thing is about when you pollinate it, it's about the size of a ping pong ball. Okay, this one right here is 16 days old on the right-hand side. This one over here on the left-hand side is 20 days old. It already weighs 216 pounds. So once they get pollinated and the growing conditions are right, they just keep growing. This okay, so some people want to know, you know, how can they tell if their fruit's still growing? Well, when they're putting on 15 to 30 pounds a day, it's obvious, you can see it. But when you get towards the end, they can't. So this the Great Pumpkin Commonwealth, which is the world organization that has come up with all this pumpkin growing competitions, they have developed from years and years of producers giving information, weights and measurements. They have developed a way to take 3 measurements on a pumpkin, works on a watermelon as well. You add the measurements together, and then there's a chart you can, which will show you exactly how much that pumpkin or watermelon is weighing, and it's pretty darn accurate too. So they measure the circumference or from around the stem and blossom end area. Then you do an over-the-top measurement from the stem to blossom all the way to the ground. And then you do a over-the-top measurement from side to side. You take those 2 those three numbers in inches, add them together, and voila, your pumpkin should show up right here on this chart. And if you had a 300-inch total measurement, then you have a 623-pound pumpkin growing on your vine at that time. So, all seems pretty simple, but there's all kinds of problems. And there's nothing that'll make a grower or a person more sick than to spend 120 days working on a big giant pumpkin, and you're watching it, it's going to be really what you're after, and then problems hit and you lose it. I've known several guys to lose a pumpkin just a few days before the weighing. As a matter of fact, it's happened to me before. One issue is wind. Really, really good producer down in the western part of the state last year had 4 really nice vines growing, nice pumpkins. Windstorm, straight line winds came through just right through his area and wiped him out. Because these pumpkin vines, the leaves will get up here 3 feet tall, and they'll be 2.5 inches in diameter. So they'll catch a lot of wind. So most people will put some kind of windbreak up, like this one in this picture. There again, more work, more details. Stem stress is a really big factor. You imagine that little ping pong size pumpkin, when you pollinate it, the stem's right there on the ground, maybe 3 inches off the ground. When this thing is a 1,500, 2,000 pound pumpkin, then the stem might be 3 feet off the ground. Well, the vine doesn't stretch. The vine's growing out on the end. It doesn't grow in the middle. So you have to allow for that. And you have to give that vine plenty of room to allow for the size of the pumpkin. And that can be a problem sometimes. Sun and heat. It's funny. The biggest pumpkins are grown north of here. Saw that one in Minnesota. Of course, I think that one's grown in a greenhouse. But Ohio grows some big ones. Maryland grows some big ones outside. Pennsylvania, the guy who won our contest down here last year was from Pennsylvania with a 2,000-pound pumpkin. The plant itself likes warmer conditions, but the fruit does not. If you want it to grow as large as you possibly can get it, it needs to be shaded. It needs to be kept cool. The skin on that, the rind, needs to be kept as soft and as pliable as it can, because, like I say, they're in their very biggest ones during a peak 3-week, 4 weeks time period. They're putting on 30+ pounds a day, and so they're really stretching that rind out. All right. Most of the time when someone loses a pumpkin at the end of the growing season, it's because of the vine and stem. Too much, I didn't talk about watering, but too much water. I mean, we've seen it even in tomatoes growing in the garden, they split. Does the same thing with pumpkins, except typically it's the vine that splits, sometimes the blossom end. This particular case, if you look on the right-hand side, this is the one right before the contest the guy lost. I think he was 16 feet out on his main vine, and the stem split on it. Most of the time, it's the blossom end that split. If they're really, really growing fast, if you're growing outside where you can't control the water, when we have a period where it's raining 2 or 3 weeks, quite a bit of rain, and typically this is what happens. It splits at the stump. Sometimes he splits at the stump. It's not a total loss. It does slow it down. If you can keep this from rotting, then it will still continue to grow, but at a slower pace. Compaction. Compaction is an issue because they're all conventional till. Everybody packs their soil with as much organic matter as they can. Soil is very loose, and pumpkins are somewhat shallow rooted. So if you're out every day, which you have to be out looking at them every day, training vines, trimming vines, uh, pulling off unwanted fruit, weeding because no one uses any kind of herbicide on these. They're going out every day and killing right in front of their vines. So there's a lot of compaction that can be going on. So everybody uses walk boards. They put boards out, step on the board evenly distributes the weight, and not as much compaction going on there. And then another thing, mice, field rat, squirrel, they tend to like to eat watermelons. Now, watermelons are a pumpkin. They tend to like to eat pumpkins. They like watermelons too, but pumpkins a little better. Now, for competition, the rind can be damaged, but it cannot enter the cavity of the pumpkin. If they're all inspected, if there's a rotten spot, there has to be firm flesh before it gets into the cavity, before it's a legal pumpkin. As a matter of fact, last year there was one that was grown bigger than the world record, but it was damaged, so it couldn't be counted in the record book. But I had this happen for watermelon one time. They get up under it, a mouse gets up under it, and you don't even know that you got a damaged watermelon until you pick it up. Typical diseases and insects affect the big giant pumpkins as they do on the field pumpkin. So I'm not going to go into that. It's very, I mean, if you get like our ID 36 or one of our guides on insect and disease control in cucurbits, then same with the big pumpkins. You need to treat them the same. The biggest thing about it, you got a lot more coverage, and trying to get coverage all through the plant and up under the plant is tough. But most of these guys do it. As a matter of fact, it's crazy with some of the products that they're using that they can get their hands on to keep the diseases off. And I had squash or vine borer up here. If we're growing, for the biggest possible one we can, they're typically put out so early that vine borer is really not that much of an issue, but it can be. Right here, I got to give credit to White Sloan. He's one of our biggest growers in the state. And White let me use some of his pictures and stuff, but he's over in the eastern part of the state near Corbin. He's grown one bigger than this now, but this is one he grew 1,514 pounds. I think it was a state record for a year or two anyway. But here's some pictures of Dwight's big pumpkin as it grew, day 19 through 45, and you can just see. So 26 days. In 26 days, it put on 900 pounds. So you can do the math. I mean, it was really growing. And the color, some people ask about the color. These things have a squash cross in them somewhere down the line, way back when, and the color can be so different. This started out yellow and ended up a pretty model orangish pink color. Color can be so different. I was going to tell you about Frank Mudd here. This is the guy that gave me the bug. Frank is world known for growing watermelons. He's right here, just 8 miles up the road from the extension office. He's grown the 3rd largest watermelon in the world and 2 of the 4 largest watermelons in the world. And we have the world largest watermelon way off here in Meade County. We do pumpkins as well, but most of the bigger pumpkins go up north. But all the big watermelons and most of the watermelons come to Meade County away. Here's some websites here that are interesting websites. If you want to know how to grow the big pumpkins, even watermelons, information's on here. These 3 websites will give you all kinds of information you may need. Most of the growers are really, really cooperate and will cooperate with you and tell you how they do it. Some of them might leave a detail or two out because they want to have a little bit of the edge, but most of them are very willing to share. And as a matter of fact, if you would like a couple of seeds to try yourself, if you contact me, I've already contacted a few growers to send some seeds my way. They will send me some seeds. Typically, some of these bigger guys, they actually sell their seeds. They have websites and they sell the seeds. But or some of these, Kentucky has a Kentucky Giant Pumpkin Growers Association, as do a lot of other states. And we typically throw our seeds in a pool, package them up, and then have an auction in the late winter. Try to raise some prize money for our contest. Just some pictures here of our contest. Our contest, like I say, is September 21st this year. So there's still plenty of time for you to plan and grow. But it's a pretty big event. Top left picture, this is a pumpkin that came out of Pennsylvania. So they have a long way to drive. They start 2 days early, and they make dang sure that pumpkin makes it here without being damaged. So this one was shrunk wrapped and taped, and even has a quilt or two around it. We're fortunate that we have a local hardware store that will allow us to use some heavy equipment to unload them. Picture on the right is just some of them as they come in. We put them on pallets right next to a little drive so everybody can look, and there's all sizes. They go from 2,000 pounds to 50 pounds. If you look at this bottom left, you look how ugly looking that pumpkin is. Well, when these pumpkins are, like you said earlier, growing 30 plus pounds a day, that rind is soft and gravity just pulls it down. Most people that they just have a few pumpkins and they're trying to keep it in shape, they push sand and whatever else they can up around it to keep that pumpkin as round as they possibly can. But some people just let them go. And this one here at the bottom is a guy from New York. He brought this one in. And it was a big pumpkin, but it sure was ugly. And then here in the bottom is a guy who came in with a big trailer load of pumpkins, and we're unloading. We also have the guy from Pennsylvania and the guy from New York that come down, Dave Stelz and Andy Wolf. They have a contract with Dollywood, and they buy a bunch of our pumpkins down here, and then they go on down to Dollywood and this past year, Branson, Missouri, and they set up displays down there. So it's pretty neat. Some of the growers actually go to Dollywood or Branson just to see their pumpkins on display. And then right here, I mentioned Scott. Scott's very knowledgeable and is willing to share how he does things. Probably one of the prettiest pumpkins we've ever had enter the contest, but he currently holds a state record of 1,883 pounds right down in the Derrick County. And that's it.